Good morning. So this message comes with some very big disclaimers. The first disclaimer is I had less than 12 hours notification knowing I would be preaching today. So keep that in account. The second disclaimer is having only 12 hours to prepare for this, I never got a full run through. So this message could go anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes. So no promises, just somewhere in that range is my guarantee. But when Frank asked me to speak, first thing that popped in my mind is my favorite parable. And it's a parable I took a class on in college, and my favorite parable is the parable of the prodigal son. And this is a parable I spoke on last year at Milligan in my senior sermon at a chapel there. So it's one I'd like to give because I think it's very relatable for myself and I think for everybody, because everybody here, most people have siblings, or at least know like a sibling or someone, or have someone they think of as a sibling. So we all kind of have this sibling relationship. We all know like the extent of it, and sibling rivalry is something that's very popular and doesn't have to be described really. But the Bible has lots of stories about families, and most of them are pretty grateful. I'm pretty grateful that a lot of the Bible stories on families, the families are pretty dysfunctional, which gives like us hope. When we have dysfunctional families, we think, well, look at the Bible; they have some pretty dysfunctional families in there. But God gave us lots of examples to learn from. So if you will, open with me to Luke 15, to the parable of the prodigal son. It's a series of 3 parables, commonly known as the parable of the lost sheep, parable of the lost coin, and the parable of the prodigal son, which I think is a false name, because the parable should be named the parable of the lost son, or more correctly, the parable of the lost sons. This is what I'll be talking about today. So if you will, turn to Luke 15. We'll start in verse 11 and go until the end at 32. And he said, "There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me.' And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. And so he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into the fields to feed pigs. And as he was longing to be fed, but the pods of the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But then he came to himself and said, 'How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread? But I perish here with hunger. I will arise and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you.' And he arose and came to his father. No, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants." Sorry about that. And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, the father saw compassion on him and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this is my son that was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. Now the older son was in the field, and he came and drew near to the house. He heard music and dancing. And he heard one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound." But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, "Look, these many years I have served you and never disobeyed your command. Yet you never give me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when the son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him." And he said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this brother was dead and is alive, was lost and is found." So as I said, I think this parable is misnamed, because when we look at the parable, we see what we call a prodigal son, which if you don't know what the word prodigal means, it means extreme or wasteful, and that's what the word means. But even though when we talk about the prodigal son, we're talking about the younger son and him being wasteful, I think a better use for the word for the prodigal is to talk about the prodigal father. Because the prodigal, I think in this parable, the prodigal needs to be given a positive spin. And the prodigal father is one who's extreme with his love. And in a sense, when it looks at it, wasteful with his love. Because extreme or wasteful just depends on how you look at it. Someone who goes out and buys a brand new truck and tricks it out might seem wasteful to one person, but definitely seems extreme to everyone. But it just depends on what you're looking at it. So the father's love looks wasteful from the outside, but the father just sees his love as his love. So when we get to this, we see that there's two brothers, and that both of them are lost. One of them is lost in a very physical sense, while the other one is lost in an emotional sense. And both of them have lost their identities as sons to the father. So that's what we're going to look at here, is show the importance of which sons there are and their identities there. Because the thing about the prodigal son is it shows us a lot about Christianity and a lot about our faith that we need to grasp, and a lot of things that we kind of don't really look at or see in other places of faith. So for me personally, I feel I relate to the older son a lot, and because I feel like, at times I know I should get it, but I just don't get it with Christianity. And that's what the parable of the prodigal son is for. It's because the older sons in this parable are the Pharisees. And Jesus tells this parable to tell them, guess what? God still loves you guys. You guys just don't quite get it. And I feel there's a lot of Christians today that we just don't get it. And we feel we get the love of God, we understand it, but God's love is such a big puzzle and mystery to us, we don't quite get it. Because the younger son, there's quite black and white with the younger son. He did bad things, he's ashamed of it, and the father loves him. And that's pretty black and white. But the older son, there's so much ambiguity in there with trying to figure out how he is the way he is, because we don't hear about him in the story until the end. So the gospel message here is showing that God's love is for everyone, and that God's love is shown for everybody. And that's the whole story of the Bible. And the Bible is essentially one big, long story of God showing how much he loves us and how far he's willing to go to love us. So we're going to look at in the parable are two things. And the first thing I'm going to look at is looking back at the first two parables. So I'm going to paraphrase the parable of the lost sheep and the lost coin quick. So the parable of the lost sheep, a shepherd has 100 sheep, and he counts them up, and he realizes he's missing one of them. So he has 99 sheep out of 100. And most of you guys think, well, that's pretty good, 99 out of 100, But it's not like that. The people here were very, very careful of things they owned. It'd be like if you went to the mall with 3 kids and came back with 2. Your spouse would be a bit upset that you didn't. You're like, but I got 2 out of 3, that's not that bad. But, your spouse would be upset that you lost that one kid. And that's the way the sheep are here. Even though he has 99 sheep, they still lost one. And that one sheep is still extremely valuable. So valuable that the shepherd goes and finds him and tries to find and searches everywhere until he finds it. So he leaves the 99 to find the one. And when he finds the one, he comes back to town and says, guys, we need to throw a party. I found the sheep that I lost. And everyone celebrates with him. And in the second one, we see a woman who's searching for a coin. Now, the coin here, there's lots of different interpretations for that, but a lot of people think it's like an inheritance or like a dowry coin for her. So if she had 10 coins and she lost one, it'd be like if you open up your bank account and you realize that 10% of your money just disappeared. You wouldn't be quiet about that. You would go searching for it, and you would find that money. And that's what she did. She tore apart her house trying to find her lost coin, and she did. And when she found it, she celebrated. But then we get to the parable of the prodigal son, and we don't find a seeker anywhere in the parable. There is no one in the parable of the prodigal son that goes out to seek what is lost. And part of that is because the seeker in the end is the father, because the father is the person who does go out to both the lost sons, his younger son when he's running and he's walking up on the road, and the older son when he's being a grump and not coming into the party. But the job here, the thing is that the older son should have been the seeker. And in the society, when you look at the Israel society, the older son should have taken the initiative to seek out his younger brother, and should have taken the initiative to seek out the one that was lost, but he doesn't. And the people who get the love of God, we should be the people to seek out those who don't get it and don't understand it. And it's the job of the church and the people who do understand it. It is our job to seek out and help those who need God's love, which is why in the parable we don't see anyone seeking out the lost son, because even the older son doesn't get the father's love and would not truly seek it. So when we see the seeker finding what is lost too, we see an incredible amount of joy. Like, you wouldn't think there'd be a party thrown over finding a lost sheep, but they do. They celebrate it. It's something, it's a big event. You think that there's something wrong with this person celebrating for after finding something that he lost, but that's just how much joy it is. And that's what we see here with the father, too. The father has this moving joy, this compassionate amount of joy that overcomes him and makes him want to show this love for the son. It isn't like, a lot of times your kid comes home and you're like, oh, you're home. It's like this father is ecstatic. He runs out. Running is something people didn't do back then, especially old men. So the father running out to his son, his servants were probably following him confused, like, what is he doing? And then the father comes out and embraces his son. So the second thing that we want to talk about is the state the younger son is in. So it took me a while reading the parable to notice this, but it stood out to me the time I finally did. When the father comes up and hugs his son, he embraces him, he hugs him, he kisses him, and then he gets a ring, a sandal, and a cloak. which are three things that signify something. The ring signifies a business sense. So the son is brought back into the family business and has a power in the business authority. He has sandals, which shows wealth and authority because only rich people wore shoes. And then he also has a cloak, which shows he's back in the family. But something happens before them that we don't see. We don't see the father say, oh, you're home. Oh, but first, how about you just go take a bath quick and we'll get you cleaned up and then you can have a party. No, the father loves the son when he looks disgusting. My imagination is that he looks like Pigpen from the Peanuts, with just the lines coming off him from reeking, because he's been in the fields working with the pigs. Now, I don't know if any of you have been in a pig barn or a pig field. It is a bad smell. Like, you do not want to be around it very long. So I can't imagine working in it. And if you ever worked in a field or worked in a barn of any kind, the smell just gets on you. So if imagine living in that for a long time and then walking 1,000 miles home, you probably would smell and look really bad. But the father loves his son so much, he doesn't care what he looks like. He throws on the robe over his dirty clothes and welcomes him into the party. And the father accepted the son for who he was and knew that, now is not a time to clean you up. Now is a time to celebrate. We can clean you up later. Now is a time for us to love on you. And so the father does this, and he says, you know what? I'm going to put my cleanliness, my acceptance on you, and then people are just going to have to accept you for who you are. And that's what we see. And we see this in the Bible, in the gospel as well. In Matthew 22, we see the parable of the wedding feast, where the wealthy man is having a wedding with his son, and he wants to invite all his neighbors, but none of them come. So he finally goes out to the streets and invites just anyone you can find. The only requirement is you have to wear a wedding garment. And you just throw it on over your clothes. It doesn't matter what you look like underneath, as long as you have the wedding garment on, that's fine. This is what middle schoolers do. They think, as long as I put Axe on, I'll be good. And that's kind of what we need to do here, is that we need to just accept people for who they are. The church is a come as you are party. And it's to show your brokenness and show your pain. Come and show everybody that we're all the same. We all are broken. We all have sinned. We're not this perfect, shining, it's not a china cabinet. We're not all clean and good like that. We're all broken. We all have things that we struggle with. We all have things that are real issues with us. And that's what this parable shows, that, the father knows his younger son has problems, and he knows his older son has problems, and he's like, I don't care. I just want to love you because you are my sons. And that's kind of a lie we see a lot. And I know there's a lot of people who are scared of the church because of how clean it is and how clean everything is inside. And I've been in churches where you get in big trouble if you make a mess in the church, because you did me a mess in the church. And so it's a bit scary at times, but the church doesn't need to be a place of super cleanliness. It needs to be a place where you come when you're broken and live together. Because the church, we can help people clean up, but first we need to celebrate where they are. Because the beauty of God's love is that he loves us no matter where we are or what we look like. Which there's been times, when I haven't looked good and haven't felt good or haven't felt like I've been a good son. And that is very true and reassuring to me. And God loves us because we are his children. He loves us as good children. He loves us as bad children. He just loves us. A quote I read last year that I quoted in my sermon from Desmond Tutu really stood out to me about this. And if you don't know who Desmond Tutu is, he's a retired Anglican bishop who served in South Africa during the time of apartheid. And he was able to witness its outlaw and see the changes that came from it. And he wrote a book called No Future Without Forgiveness, where he talks about some of the experiences he had during that time, and especially working with forgiveness on both sides of that and helping bring people who had been on either side of the apartheid together. And he has this quote that reflects on the father, and I think really stands out for good. God does not give up on anyone, for God loved us from all eternity. God loves us now, and God will always love us. All of us, good and bad, forever and ever. His love will not let us go, for God's love for us, all of us, good and bad, is unchanging, is unchangeable. Someone has said, there is nothing I can do to make God love me more, for God loves me perfectly already. And wonderfully, there is nothing I can do to make God love me less. God loves me as I am to help me become all that I have it in me to become. And this is the message the Father delivers to his sons. I love you. And that's it. There's no if clauses. There's no, as long as you do this, this, this. The Father says, I love you. And that's what God says to us. And that's what the whole story of the Bible is one big love story from God to us saying, this is how much I love you. I give you guys one choice, good, and I give you a garden full of good things and one thing to not do. And you do that one thing I not do. Well, I still love you. I'm going to give you these 10 commandments, and I'm going to come down and be with you. I'm going to rescue you from bondage and still love you. And even though you grumble and complain, I'm still going to love you. Even when you go and worship other gods, I'm still going to love you. Even when you walk away from me, I'm still going to love you. Even when you spit in my face, I'm still going to love you. Even though the Bible is full of these stories of Israelites and the people of God refusing God and rejecting God, God is still saying, I still love you. Because the point of the story, the parable of the prodigal son, is both sons fail to see themselves as sons. One of the sons sees himself as a slave. It's the younger son. When he comes back and he says, Father, I'm not worthy to be your son. I should be treated as a slave because I've abused your love. I misused your love. I haven't used your love the way you intended it. I should be nothing more than a slave. And the older son, too, who says he was slaving away in the fields. But if you're the older son of a rich man like this, you're not slaving away. You're the one sitting in the tent telling everybody else what to do. But he still thought that he was a slave compared with his father, saying, I have to work and I have to do all these things for my father to love me. But both of them had it wrong, which I think is a beautiful thing of the parable, showing that, both of them don't get the father's love because the father's love is such a mystery. But the father shows differently. God's love for us is, I think, just simply enough in one word. Well, 2 words. Prodigal is one word, but crazy is another word. Because we can't fully understand it. And there's nothing in this world that can really show us that kind of love. Because the way we love people is we think it's unconditional, but there's often a lot of stipulations we put behind it. And a lot of times, when we're in relationships, we put up these requirements for people. And God's love is something that's unlike that at all, where there's no requirements. It's just, I'm just going to love you. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can't make me love you more. You can't make me love you less, which is a beautiful thing, and it's a puzzle. So both sons are loved, despite their inability to understand the love, and despite their ability, no matter how good or how bad they are. So there's one last thing I want to talk about, in that this parable does another thing for us, and that it points us to who we should become like, and that is the Father. And that our life journey as Christians is a journey from being a son to a father, and misunderstanding the love no matter how we do, either as a younger son or an older son, and learning to be like the Father, and learning to be the one who loves perfectly. And we see this through Jesus. And a lot of times people talk about the parable of the prodigal son as quite literally a parable of Jesus, how he goes to a faraway country for us and comes back to the Father. And this is what Jesus did. He come to us to show us how to love others relentlessly, crazily, prodigally, and that this is the role of the Father. And our walk as Christians is a journey towards the perfect Father love, and become like that. Because we have been loved prodigally to love prodigally. And this is really easy to say, but it's really hard to do. Because, some days people just do stuff that's hard to love them. But I'm sure, we do stuff some days that makes it hard for God to love us. But God still loves us anyways. And as we walk away, we need to remember that God loves others around us, and the way God loves, the Father loves us, is the way we need to love. Because the parable of the prodigal son, for me, in closing, is the greatest love story ever told, about a man who loved his son so much he was willing to do anything for them. He's willing to let them walk away. He's willing to let them be far from him, because he knows that that's the only way you can love him. There's no way the father can love his younger son if he forces him to stay. The father has to let his son go for his son to learn to love him. And then when he comes back, he has to welcome him in, because he knows that's how he's going to love him. So this is my favorite parable, and there's lots of stuff I can talk about with it, but I'm going to leave it at that, to show that, we are to be the seekers as the church. Even if we are lost sons, we are in a journey learning to be the Father and learning to go out and love. And when we see the people get close, we need to remember that they may have walked thousands of miles to get a mile down the road, but it's our job to run that mile out the road to get them. Because that's the whole story, is that our Father, when we come walking home one day, he's going to come running for us, and he's going to embrace us no matter how disgusting or bad we look.